Before we jump into the lists, let's keep in mind a few things. Number one, we're going to be keeping the cost down by buying high point per dollar value models. Number two, we're going to be making the list in increments so that you can play as you build up your army. You should not be buying all of this all at once. You will get overwhelmed. Number three, we're going to avoid resin models because Games Workshop resin is bad and overpriced. Number four, we're going to make the list strong enough so that you will not automatically lose your games when you go up to play. It will actually come down to your abilities. And number five, I'm not going to be listing all the good models for an army. If your favorite models aren't here, you can cut something out from my list so that you can run that instead. Today we're going to be talking about the Genestealer Cults. The Genestealer Cults are typically downtrodden Imperial citizens who have shed the shackles of their corpse god and pledged their allegiance to their four-armed emperor. They are basically Tyranid sleeper agents who are infiltrating Imperial hive worlds. They follow the orders and commands of a Tyranid patriarch who is hiding underground. This patriarch is pulling all of the strings, telling them what to do, improving their mutations, and all the like. They do have heavy Tyranid mutation over time, which leads to them having extra appendages, altered skin, and more. You might think that that would be a dead giveaway, but on a hive city, little mutations like having an extra arm or your skin being purple is not really that standout. They have the goal of weakening the planet's defenses in anticipation for upcoming Tyranid invasions, and they will build up resistances for generations upon generations before eventually overthrowing their oppressors. They have a lot of industrial-style weapons, as the Genestealer Cults are just regular everyday workers who have become a guerrilla militia. The upsides to the Genestealer Cults are some really nice upsides, to be honest. The nature of their kind of style of faction lends itself very well to kit bashing. Because they can be any world that gets infected by Genestealers, you can make the army out of anything. You could take the classic human appearance, which is good, but I have seen great kit bashes using Tau, Eldar, Age of Sigmar minis, and of course anything from Necromunda. The army has a lot of cool tricks that will also make you feel very big brain when you pull off a good win. They have a lot of cheap bodies with Deep Strike, which means that you can very easily score secondaries without committing those expensive units that some other armies have to. They also have good battle line units, which is always nice in Pariah Nexus mission packs, just in case you run into the occasional mission rule that's going to give them some extra support. And finally, being able to run Tyranid or Guard models means that you can save a lot of money if you dip into those sides of the army. The downsides for collecting GSC are pretty tough to get through though. First and foremost, they are one of the absolute most expensive armies to collect. It is debatable whether they are the second or third, maybe fourth most expensive army to collect out of the soon-to-be 27 different factions in the game, but either way, they are really, really hard to buy. The army is also very hard to play. It relies on a lot of tricks and stacking buffs from multiple different sources to really take its damage from incredibly mediocre to terrifying. On the hobbying side, it's also hard to paint. There's a lot of texture on the army between your skin, your fabric clothing, your padded armor, your metal scraps, and much more. It all adds up to being a lot of work that you can't just slap together very easily. The new Combat Patrol is also a huge downgrade from the old one. We knew that it wouldn't be as good, but it's still hard not to think about just how much was lost. The new Combat Patrol is almost half the total points of the old one, and the units inside of it are not as good as the old Combat Patrol had. Finally, if you want to run a true Genestealer Cult army, there is exactly one style of archetype that is quote-unquote affordable as a starting point for the army. It is a huge drop from before the Codex when their Combat Patrol was so much value, you could do a lot of different builds. The army rule for Genestealers is a lot of text. The TLDR of it is that you get a resource called Resurgence Points at the start of the game. You can spend these points to bring back dead units when they die and put them in strategic reserves. It's a very powerful rule that can be used to bring back your hard-hitting unit if it goes down too soon, or make great use of the trash units you will constantly sacrifice for primary and secondary objectives. As far as detachments, we're going to be looking at two choices today. You've got the Biosynctic Brood Surge, which is a melee-focused detachment that utilizes the most cost-efficient units in the Genestealer army. When your good melee units charge, they get +1 to their charge rolls and +1 to their attacks. It's pretty simple, but it does exactly what you want a melee army to do. The second attachment we're going to be looking at is the Host of Ascension. When your units come in from Deep Strike or Strategic Reserves, they gain sustained hits and ignores cover until the end of their turn. This does enable some sustained hits on 9-inch charges for your melee units, but it is primarily focused on providing utility to those shooting units who might already be on the field or easily able to make use of the sustained hits and ignores cover. Going through the purchase order for the first list for the Biosanctic Brood Surge, we're going to be starting off with 1 combat patrol of Genestealers, and we're going to be picking up 1 box of Aberrants. As we go over to 1,000 points, we're going to be picking up 2 boxes of Abominants to lead our Aberrants, and another 2 boxes of Aberrants. As we move over towards 1,500 points, we're going to be picking up a 4th box of Aberrants, a 3rd Abominant, 1 box of Genestealers, and a Goliath. And finally, as we get to the 2,000 point, we're going to be picking up 2 Achilles Ridge Runners, and we're going to be picking up 1 Brood Coven box. At 500 points, the list is going to be about as simple as it can get. We're going to have the Jackal Alphas leading Adelan Jackals, who are going to have a grenade launcher and 2 power weapons. The Achilles Ridge Runner in this list is going to be running with the Spotter and the Heavy Mining Laser. And then we're going to be running the Acolytes as Acolyte hybrids with auto pistols because they are going to be a little bit cheaper, have some access to melee weapons, and are generally just going to kind of be there to throw away. Really, the star of the show is going to be the Aberrants. As you move up to 1,000 points is where we finally get to see the list actually kind of look how we're going to expect it to. You're going to have 2 Abominants. One is going to have Predatory Instincts so that they can deep strike the 10 Aberrant Brick towards the midboard. There are some games where if you were to deep strike these 9 inches from your opponent's deployment zone and you go first, you will just win the game. Your opponent won't be able to deal with all of the Aberrants, and the Aberrants are just going to get insane value. In other games, you'll just position them in the midboard so that if your opponent goes first and tries to do anything at all, then you're just going to get a very easy turn 1 charge and get right in their lines. At 1,500 points, it's going to be kind of the exact same thing. The big thing to note here is you are going to be running 2 units of 5 Aberrants so that all of the Abominants have something to lead. And then we've got spare points. Go pick up some enhancements. There's not really a whole lot that's going to be different here. One thing that is important to note about this, though, is that you could run the Genestealers as 2 5-mans. I have opted for 1 10-man, as I think that overall you're going to want the extra punchy power of that activation a little bit more than more general random things running around. And finally, in the 2,000 point list, again, it's going to look exactly like you would expect. You're going to be having the Patriarch leading the Genestealers to really enable them. All of the Abominants are leading Aberrants. We've had to cut enhancements for points, but whatever. Jackal is going to be leading Jackals. You've got a Magus who is going to be leading 1 unit of hybrids, and you're going to be having the Primus leading the other unit. The biggest thing here is that all 3 of the Achilles Ridge Runners are going to be run with Spotters and Heavy Mining Lasers. You're also going to be running the Goliath as a transport so that you can more easily drive some of your Aberrants around. One thing that is going to be very weird about this, if you do want to switch over to other versions of Genestealers later, is that the Achilles Ridge Runners all have Spotters and Heavy Mining Lasers, instead of Survey Augers with Heavy Mortars. But let's be real about something. The Ridge Runner is an amazing support tool that enables almost all of the shooting in the GSC army to actually feel impactful. But this melee list doesn't benefit from ignores cover, so we're just going to have them be a baby Leman Russ instead. Just make sure that you magnetize or figure out some way to put on the Heavy Mining Laser without gluing it, because otherwise, if you ever want to switch in the future, it's going to be very expensive. If you do really think that the AP3 is going to be the critical breakpoint for you, though, you can run the Heavy Mortar on 1 or 2 of the Achilles Ridge Runners. I just think that you will want some slightly better access to anti-tank shooting power with this army, with the way that it's currently set up. I think that the melee is already threatening enough, but depending on what you think you're going to run into, that AP3 breakpoint might be the game winner. The Host of Ascension purchase order is going to look very similar to the Biosanctic at first. It's going to be picking up 1 box of the Combat Patrol and 1 box of Aberrants. As we get to 1,000 points though, we're going to be picking up a second combat patrol and a second box of aberrants, really doubling up on what we already have. At 1500 points, we're going to be picking up 4 boxes of neophyte hybrids, 1 abominant and 2 benefactus. This is when you are really going to start seeing exactly how expensive Genestealer Cults are, as you have to buy all of these extra boxes of battle line. And finally, as we get to 2000 points, we're going to be picking up a 3rd combat patrol, we're going to be picking up a Goliath, and we're going to be picking up 1 Keller morph. The Host of Ascension at 500 points is going to see pretty much the exact same list as the Biosanctic Brood Surge saw. The one big difference being that the Acolyte hybrids are going to have hand flamers instead of auto pistols. This is because the flamers are just a little bit better in general, in my opinion, than the pistols, as long as you aren't making use of the melee weapons that the pistol guys can run with. Once you get it up to 1000 points, the 2 Jackal Alphas are going to be leading 2 separate units of Adelan Jackals. You're going to have 2 separate 5-mans of Aberrants. You're going to have the 2 Achilles Ridge Runners. And then you're going to have 1 unit of 10 Acolyte hybrids with hand flamers and some demolition charges, and 2 units of hybrids with just the default stuff. This is because you don't need to have a ton of flamers for a good Overwatch threat. But if you start to put demolition charges into the 5-man Acolyte hybrid flamers, then your Overwatch threat with them becomes so minuscule that your opponent's just not even going to be worried about it. In your 1500 point list, Abominant leading a unit of Aberrants should feel pretty obvious. The big thing is going to be that you have 2 Benefactors who are both going to be leading a 20-man Neophyte hybrid unit. This unit is going to have Seismic Cannons, Webbers, Colt Icon, all of the good usual stuff. This is going to be your main unit that is going to be doing a lot of the heavy punching. And because we are now at a point where your units are actually going to be able to be shooting threats, we're going to be switching those Achilles Ridge Runners from the Las Cannon variant with a spotter to the Heavy Mortar variant with a Survey Auger to really give extra power to all of your Neophyte hybrids. At 2000 points, the Abominant's going to have Our Time Is Nigh, the Benefactus is going to have Assassination Edict, and your Kellermorph is going to be a good lone op just going off and doing his own thing. You're going to be having 2 units of 10 Acolyte hybrids who are going to be having hand flamers with the demolition charges now because of the extra combat patrol, and you're going to be running 1 5-man of Adelan Jackals and 1 10-man of Adelan Jackals. The 3rd Jackal Alphas is going to get dropped here, which kind of sucks for the points value because it's already not the best, but there are an okay number of lists that are running lots of Jackals in the Host of Ascension, so it kind of balances out. That's going to cover GSC for today. I think that if you were going to pick a starter army, GSC is the last one that I would probably recommend to most people. I think that the overall playstyle can be difficult to manage. I think that for hobbying, it's kind of a tough challenge. And I think that the price point just kind of makes it not very friendly. If you are set on it, then expect a tough road, but it's also a very rewarding road. If you want an army that feels like when you have true mastery over it, you can't be stopped, GSC is a very, very good direction to go. And if you are interested in going down one of those lines where you go and you pick up guard models or you pick up Tyranid models to kind of offset the cost, you do have some very interesting choices there. I didn't include them because I think that they are more of an expansion, or if you already have either guard or Tyranids, the thing that you use to kind of get you into GSC as well. I don't think that it's necessarily the best starting point because they don't always have supported rules. Right now they do, so right now it's an okay choice. Big shout out to all of my channel supporters who help make these videos possible, such as Alexander Thomas, and everyone else who's been generous enough to support me. If you would like to try and help out the channel, please consider the links in the description where you can either check out the Amazon affiliate link or go support me on Ko-fi. Thank you all for watching.